Everyone feared the billionaire's wild daughter, until a quiet janitor shut her down. Orlia Voss walked through the grand corridors of the Voss Corporation headquarters as if she owned the entire city. The building stretched high into the clouds, its glass walls reflecting the neon lights of Neo Eden. People in the halls stepped aside, some with fear, others with awe. Everyone knew who she was, the billionaire's wild daughter, and everyone had learned, sometimes painfully, not to get in her way. She had a reputation that stretched across the city, from the glittering towers of the elite to the quiet alleys where the ordinary people lived. No one dared to challenge her, not because she was polite or fair, but because she was unpredictable. Her hair, streaked with bright colors, bounced as she moved, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. Orlia had a kind of energy that made the air seem charged, as if anything could happen at any moment. Today, she had a new plan in mind, something bold, something that would make everyone talk. She smiled to herself, imagining the chaos she would cause, the headlines, the shocked faces of the executives who thought themselves untouchable. Meanwhile, in the same building, a man quietly pushed a mop across the polished floors. Kieran had worked as a janitor here for years. No one noticed him. No one paid him any attention. He moved with calm precision, sweeping the corridors and emptying trash cans without complaint. He wore plain clothes, carried a simple toolkit, and never made a sound more than necessary. To most people, he was invisible, but Kieran saw everything. He noticed patterns, he noticed mistakes, and he understood the inner workings of the building and the technology inside better than most engineers. Orlia's footsteps echoed against the walls, her presence impossible to ignore. She had climbed up the corporate ladder of fame without actually needing a ladder. Wealth, privilege, and boldness were her tools, but Orlia was clever. Her games were not just for fun, they were experiments, ways to test her skills and the limits of the city's technology. Today, her experiment would be the biggest yet. She entered the control hub of the Voss Corporation, a room filled with glowing screens and humming servers. Security drones hovered near the ceiling, scanning for intruders, but Orlia barely glanced at them. She had already found a way to bypass their programming weeks ago. To her, they were more like toys than safeguards. She connected her small device to the main console and started to interface with the system. Her plan was daring. She wanted to take control of the central AI that managed Neo Eden's energy grid, just for a few minutes, just to see if she could. The idea thrilled her. At that very moment, Kieran was in the maintenance corridor on the floor below. He noticed a strange fluctuation in the system's readings. The lights flickered ever so slightly, a subtle sign that something unusual was happening. He paused mid-step, looking at the monitor on his handheld device. A quiet alarm sounded in his mind. Something was wrong. Most people would panic. Most people would run or call security. Kieran did neither. Instead, he adjusted the interface of his portable device and traced the source of the anomaly. The system led him upward, following the hidden tunnels and service elevators that most employees didn't even know existed. By the time Kieran arrived near the control hub, Orlia was deep into her plan. She laughed quietly to herself, fingers flying over the console. "Let's see if they can handle this," she whispered. The city's lights outside flickered slightly, and a few distant alarms went off in the surrounding streets. She didn't notice. Her focus was on the thrill, on the challenge. Kieran watched her from a shadowed corner, his expression calm. He had expected something like this. Over the years, he had noticed patterns in her behavior. She liked to test limits. She liked attention. But what she didn't know was that someone had been watching, quietly and without drama, ready to act if necessary. He studied her carefully, understanding her method. Unlike everyone else, he was not afraid. Fear was for people who lacked preparation and patience. Orlia reached a critical point. The AI was almost fully under her control. She smiled triumphantly. The building hummed with energy as her device interfaced with the core system. She imagined the city lights dimming, the news outlets scrambling to report the chaos, the panic she would cause. But then, something unexpected happened. A subtle correction in the system interrupted her connection. A calm voice in her head, almost imperceptible, seemed to whisper instructions, redirecting her own commands. She frowned. "What? No one should be able to do this," she muttered. Kieran stepped forward slowly, not to threaten, not to yell, not to fight. He simply moved into the room, holding a small tablet that controlled the emergency systems. "You're pushing the system too far," he said gently. "It's not about whether you can, it's about whether the city can handle it." Orlia blinked, confused. No one ever spoke to her like this. No one had the courage to challenge her, but the janitor standing calmly in front of her didn't seem afraid at all. Orlia tried to dismiss him with a laugh. "A janitor. You think you can stop me," she said, her voice half mocking, half curious. But Kieran didn't respond with words meant to intimidate. He simply guided her device, carefully disengaging her connection and neutralizing her hack. It was quick, quiet, and efficient. In minutes, the threat was gone. The city's systems returned to normal, lights steady and humming machines silent. For the first time, Orlia felt something unfamiliar, surprise, then awe. No one had ever outsmarted her this quickly, without confrontation, without fear, without drama. She stared at Kieran, trying to understand who he was, why he did what he did, and why she felt a strange respect for him. He didn't boast. He didn't flaunt victory. He simply turned and said, "Think about what you're doing next time." Then he walked away, returning to his quiet duties. Orlia sat down heavily, processing the moment. The thrill was gone, replaced by a curiosity she hadn't expected. Who was this quiet man, invisible to everyone else, who could challenge her without a fight? She felt something stir inside her, a recognition that intelligence and patience could be more powerful than wealth and recklessness. Later that evening, Orlia wandered through the city streets in a hovercar, her mind racing. She watched the lights of New Eden, the towers, the people going about their lives unaware of the near disaster she had caused. She thought about Kieran, his calm expression, the way he had handled the situation. For the first time, she wondered if there was more to life than spectacle and chaos. If there was someone who could teach her restraint and strategy, maybe she could channel her energy into something remarkable. Kieran, meanwhile, continued his work unnoticed, moving through the empty corridors of the headquarters. He checked systems, ensured everything was running smoothly, and cleaned as he always did. But even he felt a faint sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about stopping Orlia for the thrill of it. It was about protecting the city and showing that quiet intelligence, patience, and careful observation were as powerful as any display of wealth or daring. That night, New Eden remained calm. The city lights shone brightly, unaware of how close it had come to chaos. Orlia Voss returned to her penthouse, still wild in spirit, still full of energy, but with a seed of respect and curiosity planted in her mind. Kieran continued his quiet work, still unseen, still uncelebrated, but his influence already beginning to take root. For the first time, two worlds collided, the wild brilliance of a billionaire's daughter and the quiet, unassuming skill of a janitor. Neither would ever be the same again. And in that moment, the city held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The morning after the blackout, Neo Eden buzzed with curiosity and whispers. News feeds were alive with speculation about what had happened the night before. The elite of the city were shaken. Nobody had ever dared to challenge Orlia Voss and walk away unharmed. Rumors swirled. Some said it was a hacker, others claimed an AI anomaly, but no one suspected the quiet janitor who moved unseen in the background. Orlia, meanwhile, sat in her penthouse, overlooking the city from a height few could even imagine. She still felt the thrill from the previous night, but now it was mixed with a strange kind of frustration. How had someone invisible, neutralized her plan so easily? She replayed the moment over and over, trying to understand. Most people would have panicked or run. Most people would have begged for mercy. But Kieran had simply worked. Calm, methodical, precise. He hadn't even looked afraid. Her curiosity soon turned into fascination. She began searching the building's employee records, cross-referencing security footage, and studying maintenance schedules. The more she searched, the more intrigued she became. There he was, Kieran, the quiet janitor, a man who seemed to exist only to sweep floors and empty bins, yet had the skill and knowledge to prevent a city-wide disaster. Aurelia smirked. Usually she didn't care about ordinary people, but Kieran was different. He had power without seeking it, intelligence without showiness, and calm where others had chaos. Kieran, however, went about his work as if nothing had happened. He arrived at the headquarters early, checking systems, mopping corridors, and inspecting servers. To the casual observer, he was just doing his job, silent and unnoticed. But he was aware of the subtle attention Aurelia's actions had caused. Some employees whispered her name with fear, some with admiration, but none of them understood the quiet balance he maintained. Later that day, Aurelia decided to confront him directly. She found him in the maintenance corridor, cleaning a hallway near the lower floors. He looked up briefly, eyes calm, and gave a polite nod. Aurelia stepped closer, letting her boldness fill the space. "You stopped me," she said, her tone a mixture of amusement and challenge. "How did you do that? Why didn't you just call security like everyone else?" Kieran glanced at her, expression unchanged. "Because calling security wouldn't solve the problem," he replied quietly. "Someone needed to handle it carefully before things got worse." His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet carried authority in a way Aurelia wasn't used to. Most people obeyed her out of fear or awe. Kieran simply didn't care about those things. Aurelia tilted her head, studying him. She liked a challenge, but she also liked learning. "So, you just stepped in because you thought you could do it better?" she asked, a teasing edge in her voice. Kieran shook his head. "Not because I thought I could do it better. Because I had to. You were risking too much. It wasn't a game." His words were simple, yet they struck a chord. Aurelia had never thought of her experiments in terms of responsibility. They were always fun, always daring. But suddenly she realized someone had seen through her thrill-seeking and stopped her without fuss, without ego, without chaos. For a moment, Aurelia's rebellious nature bristled. She didn't like being stopped. She didn't like being controlled. But she also couldn't ignore the respect she felt for this man. He had not only stopped her, but he had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that she felt both challenged and fascinated. "You're different," she said finally, her voice softer than usual. "I'm just careful," Kieran replied. "I pay attention, that's all." Aurelia smiled. She liked that answer. It was simple, but it carried depth. She decided then that she wanted to understand him, to test him, to see what made him so unshakable. Over the next few days, she began to observe him quietly. She noticed how he moved through the building, unnoticed, yet always aware. How he checked systems before they failed, how he interacted with other employees respectfully, without seeking recognition. It fascinated her. Aurelia realized that power was not just about wealth, influence, or daring stunts. There was another kind of power, quiet, patient, intelligent power, and Kieran had it in abundance. She wanted to understand it. She wanted to test it. And maybe, in some way, she wanted to be guided by it. Her curiosity soon became action. She began asking questions, first casually, then more directly. "How does the system really work?" she asked one morning when she saw him near the server room. "How do you keep it running so smoothly?" Kieran paused, looking at her. "It's not about keeping it running smoothly," he said carefully. "It's about understanding what each part does, predicting what could go wrong, and preparing for it. It's about responsibility. You can't just push things for fun." Aurelia listened, genuinely intrigued. She had never had anyone speak to her this way. Most people were either intimidated or dismissive. Kieran was neither. His calm, measured tone drew her in. She realized she wanted more than just rebellion. She wanted guidance, but not guidance that limited her. She wanted someone who could challenge her mind, who could teach her strategy without taking away her creativity. Over the following days, their interactions became more frequent. Orlia began testing small things, modifying minor systems, attempting harmless experiments, while Kieran observed, offering advice quietly, never scolding, never showing frustration. Slowly, she began to see the value of patience and planning. She began to understand that boldness without control could lead to disaster. At the same time, Kieran began noticing Orlia's brilliance. Her mind worked differently from anyone else he had seen. She could visualize complex systems, connect ideas quickly, and innovate in ways that were extraordinary. But without guidance, that brilliance could be dangerous, not just to herself, but to the entire city. He realized that if he could help her channel her energy, she could achieve incredible things. Their dynamic began to shift. Orlia no longer saw Kieran as just a janitor. He became a mentor of sorts, though neither of them would admit it yet. She tested his patience with bold ideas and impulsive experiments, and he guided her with quiet wisdom and careful reasoning. Slowly, she began to respect his insight and rely on it. One evening, a small crisis occurred in the building. A malfunctioning power node threatened to overload the system. Orlia rushed to intervene, eager to fix it herself. But Kieran arrived first, calmly assessing the situation. He allowed her to participate but guided her through each step, explaining the consequences of each action. Together, they prevented the overload without damage. Orlia felt the rush of success, but now it was tempered with understanding. She realized that collaboration, even with someone much quieter and less noticed, could be more powerful than acting alone. Over time, their teamwork became more natural. Orlia learned to temper her wild impulses with thought and strategy. Kieran learned to appreciate her creativity and boldness, realizing that her daring ideas, when guided properly, could achieve things he had never imagined. They formed an unlikely partnership, a balance of chaos and calm, creativity and precision. The city of Neo Eden remained unaware of the growing alliance. To the public, Orlia was still the wild heiress, untouchable and unpredictable. Kieran remained the quiet janitor, unnoticed and uncelebrated. But behind the scenes, a transformation was taking place. Orlia's experiments became more innovative, yet safer. The systems of the city became more resilient, guided by Kieran's quiet wisdom. Together, they created solutions that no single person could achieve alone. One night, as they stood in the dim glow of the server room, Orlia turned to Kieran and said, "I never thought I'd meet someone like you. Someone who doesn't fear me, who can challenge me without trying to overpower me." Kieran smiled faintly, looking at the hum of the machines. "It's not about fear or power," he said. "It's about understanding, and sometimes understanding is more powerful than anything else." Orlia nodded, feeling a shift inside herself. For the first time, she realized that her wildness could be a force for good if guided properly. She also realized that intelligence, patience, and humility could be just as exciting as daring stunts and chaos. In the days that followed, their partnership continued to grow. Orlia began to experiment with purpose. Kieran continued to guide and protect, and together they began to shape a future where brilliance and responsibility worked hand in hand. The city of Neo Eden remained unaware of the quiet balance forming within its tallest towers, but soon, the impact of their collaboration would be felt. For now, Orlia's wild spirit remained intact, but it was tempered with thought. Kieran remained quiet, but his influence was undeniable. Two worlds, once separate, were beginning to work together, and the possibilities were limitless. The stage was set. A bold genius and a quiet mind, side by side, ready to face challenges that no one else could even imagine. And Neo-Eden, unknowing and bustling below, was about to see the first signs of a revolution guided not by fear, but by intelligence, courage, and collaboration. Days turned into weeks, and Neo-Eden continued its daily rhythm, unaware of the growing partnership forming in the heart of the Voss Corporation. Orlaya Voss, once the city's untouchable wild daughter, began to change. She was still daring, still clever, still impulsive, but her impulses were now guided by thought, calculation, and a new respect for consequences. Kieran, the quiet janitor, remained by her side, invisible to the world yet indispensable in shaping her brilliance. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the glass walls of the headquarters, Orlaya paced across the control hub. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, simulating potential innovations. Kieran stood nearby, quietly observing, ensuring the system ran smoothly. Today, she was testing a bold idea, a system that could reroute energy from unused city sectors to areas facing shortages without triggering overloads. It was a risky experiment, but Orlaya had confidence and caution on her side. "This could work," she said aloud, eyes wide with excitement. "If we can balance it properly, the city could have nearly perfect energy efficiency." Kieran nodded, not with enthusiasm but with measured approval. "It's possible," he said, "but the calculations must be precise. Any misstep could cause instability across multiple sectors." Orlaya grinned. That challenge excited her. "Then help me. I want to learn how to control it without causing a problem." Kieran moved to the interface, guiding her through the sequence of commands. Step by step, he explained the reasoning behind each choice. Orlaya listened intently, absorbing every detail. For the first time, she understood that her genius could be magnified by knowledge and patience, rather than reckless impulse. They worked together for hours, testing and adjusting, simulating outcomes and analyzing data. Orlaya's creativity brought innovative solutions, while Kieran's methodical approach ensured safety and stability. It was a perfect combination. By late afternoon, they had developed a prototype capable of rerouting energy efficiently. It was their first real joint project, a fusion of brilliance and precision. But Neo-Eden was not a city that remained calm for long. Just as they prepared to test the system in a controlled environment, a city-wide alert flashed across the monitors. An unexpected surge in the central grid threatened to overload several sectors. Lights flickered in distant neighborhoods, and emergency systems began activating. Orlaya's heart raced. She had faced risks before, but this was different. It was real, uncontrolled, and urgent. Kieran's expression remained calm. "Stay focused," he said. "We can handle this if we work together." Orlaya nodded, taking a deep breath. She watched as Kieran analyzed the surge, mapping the energy flow across the city. "We need to reroute the excess load without shutting down the entire system," he explained. "I'll guide you, but you'll have to act quickly." Together, they worked at lightning speed. Orlaya input commands, redirecting energy flows, while Kieran monitored the effects in real time. The city's power grid pulsed under their control, a complex dance of technology and intellect. Every second counted. One mistake could plunge Neo-Eden into darkness. Minutes felt like hours, but their teamwork held. Slowly, the surge began to stabilize. Lights returned to neighborhoods, machines resumed operation, and emergency alerts diminished. Orlaya exhaled, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She looked at Kieran, who remained as calm as ever. "We did it," she said, her voice a mixture of amazement and relief. Kieran nodded. "It worked because you stayed focused, because you trusted the process, and because you didn't act recklessly." For Orlaya, that moment marked a turning point. She realized that true power was not about causing chaos or showing off brilliance. It was about understanding, planning, and acting with intelligence. And Kieran, quiet and unassuming, had shown her that. But the city was not done testing them. Later that week, a new challenge arose. A rival corporation, jealous of the Voss family's influence and innovations, attempted to hack into the city's transportation AI. Trains slowed, traffic grids malfunctioned, and chaos threatened to erupt. Orlia, seeing the disturbance from her penthouse, felt a surge of responsibility. She wanted to act to show her skill, but this time she wasn't reckless. She turned to Kieran. "We need to stop them," she said firmly. Kieran's eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the situation. "We can," he said, "but we need precision, not force. Let me guide you." Working together, they accessed the affected systems. Orlia's knowledge of advanced coding and AI manipulation allowed her to anticipate the intruders' moves, while Kieran's methodical strategies ensured that countermeasures did not harm innocent systems. They traced the source of the hack, identifying the corporation responsible, and implemented a containment protocol. Within an hour, the threat was neutralized. The city remained stable, unaware of how close it had come to chaos. Orlia leaned back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. "I never realized how much could go wrong so quickly," she admitted, "and I never realized how much smoother things could go with the right guidance." Kieran offered a small smile. "It's about preparation and understanding. Brilliance alone isn't enough." For Orlia, this partnership was transforming her. She began to channel her wild energy into productive innovation, tackling problems that even seasoned engineers hesitated to approach. Kieran, in turn, found himself inspired by her creativity and ambition. He had spent years operating behind the scenes, unnoticed, but now he saw the potential of guiding someone like Orlia. Together, they were becoming more than a team. They were a force capable of shaping Neo Eden's future. However, their work was not without tension. Orlia's impulsive nature occasionally clashed with Kieran's methodical approach. There were moments when she wanted to take bold actions immediately, ignoring potential risks, and moments when Kieran had to step in quietly to prevent disaster. These moments sometimes frustrated Orlia, but she was learning to respect his caution. And Kieran, while often silently exasperated, began to appreciate her intuition and innovative thinking. One afternoon, while reviewing energy flow patterns in the control hub, Orlia asked, "Do you ever get tired of always being in the background, unnoticed?" Kieran thought for a moment. "Not really," he said. "I've always believed that results matter more than recognition. The work itself is what counts. I don't need anyone to notice to know it's done well." Orlia considered this. It was a lesson she needed, one she had rarely learned in her life of privilege and attention. "I envy that," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I have to be seen to be valued, but you just do what matters and it's enough." Kieran looked at her, calm and steady. "It's about understanding priorities, and sometimes the quiet work has the biggest impact." The days that followed saw them taking on more ambitious projects together. They improved the city's energy efficiency, optimized transportation networks, and even developed early warning systems for infrastructure failures. Each success strengthened their partnership, and Orlia began to realize that her wildness, when guided by careful planning, could create extraordinary results. Yet, challenges were never far away. Neo Eden's elite were always watching, always scheming. Some were wary of Orlia's new approach, fearing that her collaboration with a janitor might diminish her legendary image. Others were jealous of the innovative solutions she and Kieran were implementing. The city, vibrant and alive, was a constant test of their skills and teamwork. One evening, as they monitored the city from the control hub, Orlia spoke softly. "Do you think anyone will ever understand what we're doing?" Kieran shook his head. "Most people don't notice the quiet changes, but that doesn't mean they're not important. The city will benefit whether anyone realizes it or not." Orlia smiled, a new kind of satisfaction filling her. She no longer craved fear or attention. She craved understanding, progress, and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful accomplishment. And Kieran, who had always worked unseen, found fulfillment in guiding her, knowing that their efforts were shaping a better future. The city slept below, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place in its tallest towers. And in the heart of the Voss Corporation, two unlikely allies, one bold and brilliant, the other quiet and methodical, continued to push the limits of innovation, proving that courage, intelligence, and collaboration could achieve what wealth or fame alone never could. The stage was set for even greater challenges. Neo Eden, a city of light and shadows, innovation and intrigue, awaited the next test. And Orlaya and Kieran, each learning from the other, were ready to face it together. Their partnership, forged in quiet observation and daring experimentation, was no longer just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a new era, one where brilliance met wisdom, where energy met patience, and where the wild daughter and the quiet janitor would shape the future of an entire city. And though the streets below remained unaware, the foundations of Neo Eden were already changing, guided by a combination of audacity and calm intelligence, a force that would soon be impossible to ignore. Weeks passed, and Neo Eden began to feel the quiet influence of Orlaya Voss and Kieran. Their partnership, though unseen by most, was transforming the city. Energy shortages became rare, transportation grids flowed with surprising efficiency, and infrastructure failures were prevented before they even occurred. The public saw small improvements and innovations, but the masterminds behind them remained a mystery. Orlaya, once feared and unpredictable, had become a figure of subtle inspiration, and Kieran, the quiet janitor, remained unnoticed yet indispensable. One morning, Orlaya stood by the glass wall of her penthouse, watching the sunrise paint the city in gold and pink. Her thoughts were busy, as always, but for the first time, they were focused on more than stunts or spectacle. She thought of the city below, its people moving through their routines, unaware of the dangers she and Kieran had quietly prevented. She thought of Kieran himself, who had taught her patience, responsibility, and the power of careful planning. Kieran arrived shortly after, moving silently into the penthouse. He didn't announce himself, didn't expect attention. He simply observed the monitors displaying the city's systems, ensuring that the night's data had been processed correctly. Orlaya turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Another day without chaos," she said lightly. Kieran glanced up. "So far," he replied, calm as ever. "The city is stable, but there will always be challenges. We can't relax completely." Orlaya nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced before. She had learned that true power was not in fear or recklessness, but in understanding and action. And Kieran had guided her to that realization without ever demanding recognition or admiration. Later that day, a new challenge arose. A sudden malfunction occurred in the city's water distribution network. Pressure sensors indicated a risk of flooding in several sectors. Orlaya's first instinct was to act immediately, as she had in her wilder days. But this time she paused. She looked at Kieran, who had already begun analyzing the data. "Wait," he said calmly. "Rushing will only make it worse. Follow my instructions and we can fix it without damage." Orlaya took a deep breath and followed his lead. Step by step, they rerouted water flow, recalibrated pumps, and stabilized pressure in affected areas. The crisis was averted within an hour. Orlaya felt exhilaration, but it was tempered with pride in her ability to control her impulses. Kieran, as always, remained composed, guiding her with quiet wisdom. As the week progressed, Orlaya realized that her partnership with Kieran had changed more than just her approach to problems. It had changed her perspective on people, influence, and leadership. She began to interact differently with the city's elite, not with fear or intimidation, but with confidence and thoughtfulness. She proposed innovations in energy, transportation, and infrastructure with clear plans and careful calculations. To the surprise of many, the elite began to listen. They had always feared her, but now they respected her. Kieran, however, remained in the background. He did not seek recognition, awards, or praise. He understood that the impact of their work mattered more than public acknowledgement. And yet, Orlia felt compelled to ensure his contributions were recognized, even subtly. She began inviting him to discussions with engineers and planners, giving him the opportunity to share insights without taking the spotlight. It was a delicate balance, but one that strengthened their partnership and the city's progress. One evening, as the city lights glimmered below, Orlia and Kieran stood on the rooftop of the Voss Corporation building. The sky was a deep violet, dotted with stars, and the streets below moved with quiet energy. Orlia spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I'd find someone who could challenge me, guide me, and still remain unseen by everyone else." Kieran looked at her, calm and steady. "It's not about being seen," he said. "It's about making a difference. The work matters more than recognition." Orlia smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't known before. She realized that her wildness, once a force of chaos, had become a force for creation. And Kieran, once a quiet observer, had become her partner in shaping the city's future. Their next project was ambitious. They planned to implement a city-wide energy management system capable of predicting demand, rerouting surplus energy, and preventing overloads before they could occur. It was a complex task, requiring innovation, precision, and careful collaboration. Orlia brought her creativity, designing algorithms and simulations, while Kieran ensured every step was calculated, secure, and efficient. As they worked, challenges arose. Unexpected glitches, minor sabotage attempts, and system errors threatened to derail the project. Orlia felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the temptation to act impulsively. But Kieran's calm presence reminded her to think, plan, and execute carefully. Together, they overcame each obstacle, their combined skills proving more effective than either could have achieved alone. When the system was finally operational, Neo Eden experienced an unprecedented level of stability and efficiency. Energy flowed seamlessly across the city, transportation networks operated without delay, and infrastructure failures became rare. The public noticed the improvements, attributing them to advances by the Voss Corporation. Orlia allowed herself a quiet smile, knowing that Kieran's guidance had made it possible. The media, as always, focused on her. Headlines praised her ingenuity and daring vision, unaware of the quiet janitor whose influence had been crucial. Orlia didn't mind. Recognition was not what mattered. What mattered was the impact of their work and the partnership that had made it possible. She looked at Kieran, who continued his tasks without fanfare, and felt gratitude, respect, and genuine admiration. As the days passed, their collaboration extended beyond technology. They began planning initiatives for education, public safety, and environmental improvements. Orlia's charisma and influence, combined with Kieran's careful planning and knowledge, created solutions that were both innovative and sustainable. The city thrived, its citizens enjoying benefits they could not fully understand, unaware of the careful minds behind the progress. One day, a young engineer approached Orlia with an idea for improving the city's transportation efficiency. Orlia listened, but instead of taking full credit as she might have in the past, she turned to Kieran. "What do you think?" she asked. Kieran studied the proposal, analyzing potential risks and benefits. "It has potential," he said thoughtfully. "But we need to test it in stages. If we implement it all at once, there could be unintended consequences." Orlia nodded, appreciating his advice. Together, they guided the young engineer, turning a simple idea into a well-structured, tested plan. Orlia realized that leadership was not about dominating ideas, but about nurturing them, ensuring that innovation was both bold and responsible. As months passed, the city of Neo Eden continued to flourish. Public perception of Orlia shifted. She was no longer just the wild daughter of a billionaire. She was a visionary, a leader, and an innovator. Yet, she never lost the spark that made her daring and unique. And behind the scenes, Kieran remained her anchor, guiding her brilliance with quiet intelligence and steady patience. One evening, they stood together on the rooftop once more, looking out at the city. The skyline shimmered with lights, streets flowing with life, and systems operating smoothly. Orlia turned to Kieran, her expression thoughtful. "We've done something incredible," she said. Kieran nodded. "Not just us. The city itself is part of it. We provided guidance, but the people make it work every day." Orlia smiled, understanding. She realized that true impact came not from fear or fame, but from collaboration, intelligence, and dedication. She had been wild, impulsive, and unpredictable, but under Kieran's guidance, she had learned to channel her energy into creation rather than chaos. As night deepened, the city glowed below them. Neo Eden had become more than a collection of buildings and systems. It had become a reflection of human ingenuity, courage, and collaboration. Orlia and Kieran, though different in every way, had found balance. One brought boldness and vision, the other patience and wisdom. Together, they had transformed not only the city but themselves. And in that quiet moment, standing above the thriving metropolis, Orlia realized something profound. Fear could never inspire lasting change, and wealth alone could never create innovation. It was the combination of courage, intelligence, and collaboration that shaped the future. And with Kieran at her side, she knew that they could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and guide Neo Eden toward a future brighter than anyone had imagined. For the first time, Orlia felt truly free, not free to act recklessly, but free to create, innovate, and lead responsibly. Kieran, though still quiet and unseen by the world, had given her more than guidance. He had given her perspective, discipline, and the power to channel her brilliance for the greater good. Together, they turned away from the edge of the rooftop, walking back into the building. The city slept, unaware of the quiet revolution happening above, but Neo Eden had changed. The wild daughter and the quiet janitor had proven that human ingenuity, courage, and intelligence could overcome fear, chaos, and unpredictability. And as the city moved forward, their partnership remained a silent, unshakable force, ready to guide it into a future full of possibility.